This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the February 21st meeting of Easthampton's Economic Development and Industrial Commission. This meeting is likely to go till about 5:15. We're going to leave as much time as we can to have a conversation with Representative Carey and Senator Vilas early in the meeting. But for now, I'd like to get us going on our agenda. Cassie, you've raised your hand.
I did intentionally.
Tell me.
How do you make it so that you can see all the different videos? I'm sorry, I'm new to this technology.
That's okay. You can hit the little, it looks like three dots in a column.
Got it.
That
Okay.
should give you some view settings, and you can change the number of squares.
Thank you. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Okay. So amongst those of you who attended January's meeting, I'd like to take this opportunity to approve our January meeting minutes. So do we have a motion?
I will motion to approve the January minutes.
Okay, and do I have a second? I see a second from Paul. Very good. Any further discussion about those minutes other than I will change the spelling of my last name? Okay, very good. All in favor of approving the January meeting minutes? Let me see an indication. Mo, you're excluded. Cassie, Chris, can I see you say a thumb up? Or okay, very good. All right, January meeting minutes approved. I see we have some members of the public here who are not just Senator Vilas or Representative Carey. We have a few minutes set aside for public speak time. Is there anybody who would like to address now any topics that are not on our agenda? If so, please feel free to raise your hand literally or raise your hand using the raise hand button. I see.
I am a prolific hand raiser today. I just want to remind people about the pollinator meeting on March 2nd, if you haven't already received notice about it. Very cool project, deserves support from all Easthampton citizens.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's being held both, that one is in person at 50 Payson, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And I saw a thumb up emoji from Sean A. Sean, do you have something you want to share now or no? I see you're unmuted, but I don't hear you. Oh, now you're muted again.
I think he was just thumbing up.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
All right, good. Okay.
Yes, that's correct. Sorry.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Thanks, Sean. Okay, so we've got, I see the heads and the initials of Representative Carey and Senator Vilas, and I'd be very happy to have you come on camera and begin our discussion with us. We're a little ahead of time, but hi, Representative Carey. Great to see you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hello, Senator Vilas. Great to see you. Welcome.
Thanks for having us. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks for making the time. We really appreciate it. What a treat. So I sent you a little vignette about what got us to this topic in the first place. To refresh people's memories, we had a quick conversation with some business owners in Northampton, longtime business owners in Northampton who had run East Heaven Hot Tubs and Spa for 40 years. There was a fire at that property and they started thinking about ways to expand or change their business site, and they were looking in Easthampton. And so they've gone to great lengths to establish a site on Route 10, which is a highly trafficked area that would get them a lot of visibility. And they have really cool ideas to improve the site. And what they realized is that even going through the process of using geothermal energy and solar and what electric energy is available to them, the BTUs required to run the number of hot tubs they'd ideally be running at their likely to be very popular business, is not possible to achieve without the natural gas source that historically they'd used at their previous site. But the pipes to the current proposed site in Easthampton are small enough that they can't handle that kind of volume. And so they started wondering, oh, well, we've got this gas moratorium thing. How does that affect what is possible for us at this site? And so this started us thinking about all kinds of things about how the gas moratorium, which is, being it's being perpetuated through a combination of things, including the Eversource Gas Company. There are lots of different kinds of conversations we could have about that and its effects on economic development prospects and home ownership and all that. So we thought we would bring the topic. I mean, I assume I have invited the members of the EDIC to come here today with a couple of questions for you and a couple of topics that they can add. And we're interested in what you're hearing, what you're thinking about, how this comes up or doesn't in legislative discussions. So I'm going to stop talking. I see that Paul is unmuted. Paul, maybe you would like to weigh in here with something more about this topic. Is that true?
I wasn't anticipating, but I certainly can. You can always call on me for commentary, Gwen. I am aware, certainly, Senator Dalis and Rep. Carey know that this is an issue that affects a lot of communities in this area. I know Holyoke has had a lot of discussion about that in the recent past, and I'm sure the other surrounding communities have as well. Part of this issue is that the gas companies want to see pipelines being built, and they don't necessarily always have the political or community support for those things. And I've heard it said, and I don't know how true it is, but I've heard it said that they will even restrict the flow of gas in pipeline that could accommodate more to those communities that oppose additional pipeline construction. It's being used as in a punitive way. And I don't know if those things are true, but I've heard that. And anyway, it's kind of an awkward spot, I think, for a lot of communities to have this conversation, because there is a legacy of coal power generation in so many of these communities. And to try and be more environmentally friendly, there was a big shift toward natural gas, which I understand is roughly half as environmentally harmful as burning coal. And then but it still does have carbon emissions through, consuming and building and manufacturing natural gas. And so people long term want to get away from this. But, as we're seeing with the issue with East Haven hot tubs, there aren't necessarily alternative sources of fuel that can support, businesses and homes and things, at least in an affordable way yet. So I've heard natural gas referred to as a bridge fuel that will help us get to the real green future that we want, even if it's not perfect. But I've also heard a lot of people say that just any support of natural gas is wrong because we want to get rid of it altogether. And so it's harming the planet to do it. So certainly I know this is probably a difficult political issue to talk about and tackle. Hopefully we're not going to hold your feet to the fire in any way, but I think we're all very interested to hear your guys' perspectives on this, being that you probably interact with a lot of communities having these issues and are familiar with a lot of the different dynamics going on. So that's it for me, unless you want more, Gwen.
No, I think that's great. I am happy to entertain other points or questions from members of EDIC. I'm also happy to invite some kind of response, but it looks like Chris and Tom have stuff to say. So with your permission, Congress folks, I will invite Chris and Tom to share their thoughts. Chris, you want to go first?
Hi, thanks for coming. I'm curious if you know how much gas is being diverted from our communities for export and how much profit they're making off of that at our expense, and if there's something we can do about that specific.
Okay, thank you. Tom, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just to piggyback on Paul's comments, and I know East Haven is the business that's looking to come in, but it's also affecting others. For example, the the proposed project on Northampton Street has decided to go with propane. I don't recall now if those were going to be underground or above ground, but obviously that's an added expense to their business plan that they didn't expect before they went there. And I agree with Paul. Massachusetts was sort of patting itself on the back that they fought and won the pipeline, but I'm not sure if we won the battle and lost the war. And I just don't know if anyone has a big enough stick to hit Eversource with that can make a difference. It just seems like we're a small fish in a big pond trying to change policy, if you will, or what appears to be retaliation from Eversource. Again, I just don't know who has the big enough stick to hit them with to try to open up. I can think of countless friends and neighbors who wanted to convert to gas and just couldn't in their own homes. So it's not just hitting the businesses, it's hitting the average homeowner also. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. So, Senator Velas or Rep. Carey, I invite your thoughts at this point. You're not required to answer any of our very particular questions, but I'm interested in knowing what you've been thinking about, how this has progressed through your brains since we invited you.
John always likes me to start when we're in Easthampton because I live in Easthampton. So tell me if I'm wrong, John.
I always like to defer to the rep of the community that I'm in, but however you want to do it, my friend.
That's fine. We'll both share some ideas, and hopefully it'll be more of a dialogue and a back and forth, because I'll tell you right now, we don't have all the answers, so we wish we did. And I think it's meetings like these that help us know what the issues are that are going on. If a small business, if a new business has a problem with a state agency like DPU, for instance, or a local utility like Eversource, for instance, I wish they had just called us directly. Maybe we could have gotten some questions answered for them. Sometimes DPU will answer our questions quicker than other people's, whether it's right or wrong. That's the way it works. So that's what's happening. So we're happy to be helpful when we can. And the earlier we hear about these problems, the better chance we have of being helpful. But looking at natural gas, stepping back, looking at it from 10,000 feet view, the question was posed kind of, what are you hearing on the state level? And we'll see what the senator here is hearing on the Senate side. But from what I'm hearing, there's not much of an appetite to get the pipelines in. We see it every time there's a proposal. They get shut down. The communities come out against it. This has happened in Western Mass, across the state. People still have the Merrimack Valley explosions fresh on their mind, even though that was now over 4 years ago, I think. Towns are trying to ban natural gas outright. Brookline did it. Then Attorney General Maura Healey said, no, you can't do that. And the pressure was on us to allow them to do that. And so in our latest climate bill, we've done a number in the 4 years I've been in, we've done a number of climate bills. And the latest one, the governor signed last summer, July, August. There's a part of that bill that allows up to 10 municipalities to just outright ban natural gas in new buildings. And that was something that more than 10 communities asked for. And so now we're seeing DPU write up the regulations for that. More towns can apply to do that. 10 is going to be the limit for right now, though. And we'll see in the next year, 2 years, as that gets implemented, how that affects those communities and affects the Commonwealth. But legislatively, I'm seeing more bills filed for banning natural gas than for expanding natural gas. That's statewide. As far as working with Eversource in our community, you're absolutely right. I think, Paul, you said it. It's a touchy subject. I happen to be able to afford a house in this neighborhood that has natural gas. My friend, less than 1 mile away, happened to buy a house in a neighborhood that doesn't. And, so I don't like to say, I know right from wrong, who can use it, who can't. I'm using it right now in my house just because I happen to be able to afford a house in this neighborhood that happened to have it. So I think we need to get a little creative and see what can we do to support the businesses in town? What can we do to make sure that we're continuing to keep housing affordable? That was one of the provisions in that ban that I spoke of. Towns couldn't even apply for that unless they already met their affordable housing quota. So there's certain things where we're trying to look at it from both angles, but I really wish there was a black and white, right or wrong answer, but there hardly ever is in this line of work that we do. Chris, I don't want to ignore your question. I'm not sure I understood it. We import all our natural gas from Canada, from a stretch of fracking done between New York and Kentucky. Most of ours in New England comes either from Canada or actually, I think we're the only place in the country that ships in natural gas by boat. I believe Massachusetts is. We get shipments into the city of Everett, I think from Africa. So tell me if I misunderstood your question, but we're importing our natural gas.
I mean, I think we probably have a net import, but I think that the last, I think it was the Dracket pipeline that got killed. That one had a large contingent of export built into it, which is one of the reasons it failed. I don't know how much we're exporting or what the plan is. That's why I was asking. But I know that there's an import-export going on, and it's not all staying here. Yeah. And I think it does leave by boat as well.
Okay. So I don't have those numbers. I could try to track them down for you if you'd like. But I don't have them here tonight.
Thank you.
A couple clarifying questions for the minutes, please. Is Brookline's ban in place across the board or just in new construction?
Just in new construction.
Okay, got it. And then was it only...
They didn't get that ban. They're one of the 10 communities applying for the new.
Oh, okay. And the 10 municipalities, you say they have to meet the affordable housing standard?
Yes.
Oh, got it. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. No problem. It's probably a good time to pass it over to my friend, Senator Vilas, and he can correct everything I just said incorrectly.
No, I'm not going to correct anything you said. If anything, I'm going to validate a lot of it, right? So I guess depending on your perspective, the push really at the state level is to continue to kind of to ban, right? I mean, the bills that we see on the statewide level are really to ban any natural gas in any shape, form, or fashion. Look, but I even want to take it a step back, and I have the honor, the distinct honor of representing Holyoke as well, and this is something that we've seen before, right? There's these let's build a pipeline. In a lot of instances, there's some serious pushback to it. Some would say overwhelming pushback to it that is successful. The pipeline ends up not being built. And then like you're seeing in Holyoke right now, and you're starting to see here in town, is then prices shoot up. I hate to be so it's kind of one of those, pardon my French, damned if you're doing, damned if you don't. We know that if we want to move towards, using this very loosely, more green energy sources, that's the right thing to do. But the reality is that, in all of the many of the communities that are going through this right now, you see an increase in prices. Like the businesses in question here that want to open up shop, they're coming to the realization that it's going to cost them much more to open up, with kind of not having this option of natural gas and then propane. Someone mentioned propane. I forget who it was. And one of the ironies of this, and I'm going to use Holyoke as the example, is you kind of have this natural gas ban, prices go up, and then that puts people in this almost weird situation where the energy that they have to use, the energy source, is actually more anti-environment than the natural gas, which is kind of just puts you all on your head and says, wait, what are we doing here? So for me, it's kind of it's almost like all right, where do we want to be as a society, in a commonwealth, in a community? Do we want to Do we want to take an absolute stand and say that, no, we are pushing forward. This is the right thing to do for the environment, and we need to do this. And that's fine if we do. But folks need to realize that there are economic costs of doing that. And when I say economic costs, it means that costs go up. I mean, that to me is in many instances economics 101. That's just what happens. We've seen it all throughout. I mean, that's so my persuasion, because you asked, is there kind of that middle ground where we can take a stand and kind of make this commitment that we want to be more environmental friendly, but doing it in such a way, maybe in increments, we'll say, for lack of a better way to describe it, where we realize that if we go down this path, we are going to really hurt, or I should say impede, businesses, residents' abilities to afford living or operating in wherever we're talking about. So it is a Hobbesian choice in many respects. And I don't know how else to describe it, but that's the reality. We've seen a past as precedent. We've seen it happen in enough communities. And again, I have the benefit of being involved in these conversations at Holyoke, and it's in many instances, neither side wants to give, right? On one side, it's, these prices are really, really expensive. We can't afford to do business here. We're going to go elsewhere. And then on the other side, it's, no, we need to do what's absolutely right from a environmental standpoint, consequences be damned. And it's not a gray debate, right? It's black or white, and both sides are kind of really embedded in their positions, where I wish there was some type of hey, let's transition to this. That's where we want to go. But we also need to be mindful of the fact that it is going to have it. Anybody who thinks, and maybe I'll be the bad guy on this Zoom, I guess it is what it is. But anybody that thinks that these bans on natural gas or other sources of energy, that they're not going to have an impact on costs, residents and businesses, quite frankly, you're not living in reality. That's just what we know from every community who has done it. So like the rep said, I really want to have a conversation, really a deep dive conversation, and see, is there a way we can kind of thread that needle, if you were, and kind of walk that perilous, minefield, if you will, and try to see if there's a middle ground where we can do what's environmentally right, but realizes that businesses are going to probably not want to come here because of the cost of operating and the cost of energy with some of these policies in place. I mean, that's kind of the black and white scenario where I see where we are here in Easthampton and beyond.
If I could just add one thing, a little bit of a clarification, because I spoke so much about the banning provision in that bill. I don't want you to think that was the whole bill. That was a much larger climate bill. We've got our emission reduction goals to get 50% by 2030, 75% by 2040, net zero by 2050. And so we've done a couple bills kind of to say, all right, if that's going to happen, how's it going to happen? I don't think anybody thinks, all right, we're just going to unplug all the natural gas and done with that. So there's been a push to, increase solar, increase offshore wind, increase the battery storage and the grid's capacity, all these little things. And so just one provision of that bigger bill was that natural gas ban. But, I've seen just a couple months ago, maybe it was December, the town of Douglas got approved by the DPU for a brand new Eversource natural gas pipeline. So there isn't a dead stop on this issue in the Commonwealth, just to be clear. Because I think one thing I'd like to learn from you folks is, what are you hearing? All right, we've got that one business. Are you hearing from a lot of businesses about this? Does this come up all the time? Is it about an increase in use in one site at a time? Because that's one of the things. If a business comes in and uses the biggest business's capacity, that's allowed. They just can't expand it and add more. So, are we courting those types of businesses? Are we seeing an influx of requests? Is there something that you and us can do, working with Eversource to kind of, expand when it makes sense, or not expand when it doesn't, rather than just the outright bans? So I just wanted to mention some of that stuff.
And Rep, and thank you. I hope hopefully my remarks weren't misconstrued. I wasn't even talking about the legislation, to be honest with you. I was talking about stuff that had happened previously. I was kind of talking about the Holyoke experience, stuff that long preceded this legislation. Don't get me wrong. I mean, one of the beautiful things I think about this legislation was the temporal aspect of it, right? It was over so many years. And I think that's where kind of that middle ground lays, right? It's this absolute no or yes immediately right on the spot, where I think we get in these cost problems where costs start to go up for businesses as people. I think the legislation that we passed, we were both proud supporters of, but yeah, so I just want to be clear that I certainly wasn't attacking that legislation. I voted for it. I thought it was a really, really good bill, good law. I'm talking about kind of these conversations that we've had, over the past several years with the pipeline coming in, the communities kind of mobilizing against them, and what necessarily follows from an economics, financial standpoint. So if I wasn't clear, I apologize.
Yeah, that's useful. Tom, I'll give you a chance in a mere moment. I didn't give you, as congressional folks, the insight into EDIC in Easthampton, which is basically, we're a bunch of volunteers who are mayorally appointed. And so we are enthusiastic about economic development while largely having no expertise. So in response to Rep. Carey's question about the degree to which we're hearing about this issue, we had our little Spark vignette with East Heaven Hot Tubs, and Tom brought up the new proposal for the redevelopment of the Tasty Top site, which could be a big housing development in addition to retail and some really valuable services in town. So I don't think that we find ourselves in a position to say how big a problem this is. It just sparked our thinking going, oh man, we have RFRs out for reuse of 3 really old school buildings. What does this implication? What is this implication for those buildings? What is the implication for other kinds of businesses that may need, in the instance of East Haven, to expand upon the amount of gas coming into that site? Even though it exists, it's not enough in its current instantiation. So, Tom, would you like to follow up?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts to follow up on that one, Gwen, which is, and to Representative Carey's question. We're aware of those 2 on Northampton Street, but I guess we don't know what we don't know. We don't know how many businesses may have decided, I can't afford in my business model to use some other source other than gas. I can't afford propane because it really messes up my business plan. So how many businesses decided not to locate here, decided to not even locate in Massachusetts because it is a statewide ban? One other thought too, following up on Chris, I thought, other than folks just being adverse to a pipeline going through their community, I thought part of that opposition was that the pipeline, and again, I could be wrong on this, but because it goes way back here, I thought the pipeline was going to be used for the purposes of exporting gas. It was going to come through Massachusetts and go straight to the coast into whatever container they used to ship it, and it was going to leave us, but simply come through us. And that might be the case, but if Eversource had a marketing hat on for a moment, they could sell this on, and again, I know inherently there's inherent opposition to pipelines, but sell it from the standpoint of how it's going to benefit the communities, benefit homes and businesses. And maybe communities will ban it, but there needs to be some sort of step process here. If we banned oil and we banned gas and we banned whatever, we're going to get kind of cold here 9 months out of the year. So what's the alternative if you're going to ban this? And I totally agree with the senator's comments. It's the same thing about, fight new business and guess what happens to your taxes. So fight expansion of natural gas and guess what happens to your natural gas prices. You limit it and the prices are going to naturally go up. Thanks.
Yeah. Paul, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on what Tom just said. But I think I know that we're in a gas moratorium right now here in Easthampton. I believe Northampton is also. Holyoke also is, and I think it's been a number of years. I know that there has been commentary that I've heard from like the mayor a few years back was talking about that it's posing a barrier to attracting businesses. I've also heard that it affects new housing development because it's more affordable. Obviously, if you're able to add housing to a natural gas supply. I guess it sounds like the alternative for a lot of communities that are looking to still have their development is to encourage the use of propane. But propane is another fossil fuel. If people want to get rid of natural gas right now, do they want to get rid of propane tomorrow? I guess where is really the end point that we're looking for? Because if natural gas is better than coal, like, okay, well, let's switch to that. Well, then propane, I don't even know that it's better than natural gas. I think it burns cleaner, but how they produce it, it's still a fossil fuel. I know that it's transported on diesel burning trucks and that so there's other effects to it. And I guess I don't know about the statewide pipeline where they're talking about exports. I haven't heard anything about that, but I am under the impression that there is a pipeline that serves this market there was a proposal to expand it a few years back, and that was shut down. And at the time, it was described that we were at maximum capacity. So if it's a matter of not building a new pipeline, but replacing an existing pipeline, to accommodate a community that's grown, or a group of communities that have grown over the decades, that doesn't seem like a political poison pill to try and swallow. Maybe it is, but I guess I don't know if I have so much of a question as a comment, but it's just those are the things that I think about when I hear what Tom is saying. And, so that's what I've got.
Congressman, you want to have any opportunity to respond? We have a member of the public who's interested in sharing as well.
I just want to know which one of us, the rep or myself, got promoted. Who's the congressman here?
Well, it was Congressman, State Congress. What are you going to do? What are you going to be called? Folks from the state.
John and Dan is just fine.
Okay.
John and Dan.
JD.
No, I would just to Paul's point. I mean, to me, and admittedly, this is not a fossil fuels, and kind of the way that it's certainly not an area of expertise of mine. But one of the things, and again, this is from kind of my Holyoke dialogues, it was, many people who are, who do this stuff for a living kind of made a lot of really went out of their way to talk about, the absurdity. And that's my recollection, them using that word, not 100% sure it was, but, it's no to natural gas, but yes to propane, when, it's a debatable point. Like, what is worse for the environment? And that to me kind of just really is what shed some real light that this is a political thing. But I'll just say this. I think as it relates to the future, I think that communities and the citizens of these communities really need to take a hard look at where they are in terms of, where do we want to be? Where do we stand as a community? What are our values? Because I think, I just wish this debate, and someone just said it, and I don't know who it was, if it was Thomas or Paul, but it was kind of, selling it. I think it was Thomas, kind of selling it to the people and really talking about what the benefits of this would be. And I would just add to that, not just the benefits, but what the negatives would be if you do go down this path. In other words, let's ban all of these fossil fuels. I get it. But if we do that, we need to go into it with eyes wide and ears wide open to know that this is going to have a very real impact on our communities, and it's going to bleed into economic development. And again, this is certainly not my background, but I've been around the block long enough to see some of the communities that I represent where that's kind of what happens. Folks take a very principled, and I can't stress that enough, very principled environmental stand, which is great, but the net result is these cost increase. So, but you said, I think I see Sean maybe has a hand open. I just wanted to kind of echo what someone had said.
And if I can just jump in, first of all, please just call me Dan. Yeah, so when I was thinking earlier, we were talking about the local pipeline and the opposition to it. I wasn't thinking of the larger one that just got mentioned. I was thinking there was one, I think it was going to go from Agawam to Holyoke and then have some branches up to Northampton and Easthampton. And that was in the more recent past where that was the idea. And the overwhelming public sentiment was don't do it. So I think we do need to get creative. You know, that's why we didn't allow as many bands as some people wanted. We said you can have 10 out of 351 cities and towns. And here's the specific ways you can get to it. Because I think we do have to be incremental. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but that's part of this bigger plan is you got to take the long view. And if we can get the offshore wind going, we increase the gigawatts allowable under those programs. Eventually, hopefully, the idea, we get more solar, we get more offshore wind, we get more input. We need less input coming from getting electricity from burning natural gas, those types of things. But it certainly is, you got to play the long game on that and not just flip the switch and go full ban and, you know, send everybody to the propane store. As you said, Paul, you know, we got to be looking at some of these other long-term goals as well. So I know Sean's got his hand up, but I just wanted to.
Sean, you want to introduce yourself, share your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. My name's Sean Abbott. I'm a Easthampton resident, although I haven't been for very long. And I was just curious about the conversation that was going to happen here. One anecdotal point of evidence that I want to offer. There's a lot of other things that I will probably be writing an email about later, just after I have a little bit of time to do some research. But anecdotally, I just replaced my gas heat in my new house with a cold climate heat pump. I did that in I don't remember, October or November. Year over year, I'm saving about $150 in total utility outlay because I'm paying so much less for gas. I am paying less than 15% more for electricity because cold climate heat pumps are much more efficient than the other options. So I think that a little bit more numbers and evidence may be in order on some of these suppositions about cost.
Interesting. Thanks for that perspective. And that's become really salient. Like that is just information coming out from the abbreviation is IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that has all the environmental accommodations built into it, is really an interesting plan to see roll out nationwide. Tom.
Thanks again, Gwen. One of the benefits of having you here, John and Dan, I didn't forget your name, Dan. I was looking at my notes. The benefits of having you here is this is a statewide issue, not an Easthampton issue. Easthampton can't unilaterally put a pipeline in. It's a statewide issue that has to be dealt with at the state level. That's where the ban went into effect. So I guess my other thought is that this has to be affecting, you may or may not be hearing from that. I know John's mentioning Holyoke. That's been pretty public about their issues, but I have to believe this is issues in other communities around this, the other communities in your districts. And I guess I was just wondering if there's any way your offices have the ability to survey somehow to see what's going on. Are there businesses that haven't been able to expand or open? Are there homeowners who would have been interested in converting to natural gas? What's going on in the districts you serve? And if other representatives or senators did that across the state, what would that look like if that was brought back to Boston to say, here's what's going on in our districts? I'm not sure why there's not a bigger outcry because of the inability of these businesses or homes to get natural gas. Thanks.
Yeah, it does make me curious, like whichever communities are those that apply to be allowed to ban gas in new construction and overall become, I think for the rest of us, interesting little test cases, how much time we have to be interested genuinely and instead of just annoyed with how costs are going up for the rest of us. I'm interested to see what that actually looks like and how they get inventive about energy sourcing, and what plans they do make, because it's a big dang deal. Mo.
I just wanted to follow up with, Tom's comment, and wondering why more communities aren't expressing concern about businesses, restaurants in particular, I would think, but that they're not limited. But I think that's because this situation has been going on for so long. I mean, it's got to be, I can remember talking about this when I was in Westfield, and this has got to be, I don't know, 10 years going on, or am I nuts? Just a comment.
Yeah, I think it dates back to 2014, maybe 2015. So almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one thing I was thinking, Tom, you mentioned the Tasty Top property earlier, and that to me is kind of a good example of the counter arguments we hear. I'm not saying this is right or wrong or my opinion, but I know I can name hundreds of people in my district who would say that's the reason not to have the expansion. What a perfect opportunity for a new building to be net zero, or to try new heating technologies, or to try some of these cost saving things we've heard about. So, I mean, that's why with the 10 city ban, that's what it is. It's all new building projects that have to follow those rules. So I think, it's a conversation for the whole city. If the EDIC brought it to the city council to pass a resolution to tell us to file an expansion bill, I bet you they wouldn't. That's just my personal opinion there. But just food for thought. That.
And you said you wouldn't?
My personal opinion is they wouldn't pass it.
Okay.
You meant the city council, right? They wouldn't pass it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What I found is
just food for thought.
Yeah. What I have found is it's so kind of going back to, and again, I'm only gonna speak to things that I've had experience with, and I'll go back to Holyoke. So new businesses are setting up shop, but this is a very active debate in Holyoke. And it was, okay, do we object to the kind of the building of this new pipeline, knowing full well that the current one's at capacity and what it will mean? And I think, and this is my own perception, but I think a lot of people maybe weren't aware of the impact it was going to have, both on the residential side and also on the attracting new business side. And this is my own perception and my own kind of opinion, just talking to people, is that there's a little bit of a disconnect between, the powers that be, if you will, on the respective councils, and then people that are looking at their bills. This is going to be an ongoing debate. And Thomas, to your point, yeah, I think it makes sense to kind of survey or talk to folks in our communities, because I do think this is going to be an ongoing conversation about, how we get to where we want to be, environmentally friendly. And I'm using this very loosely to kind of cover everything that we're talking about, but doing it in such a way where, people are not, people are able to A, pay their bills on the residential side, and B, it's not just an across the board, almost do not come here to do business type of sign on your front lawns in the cities and towns. And that kind of, again, I'm being redundant now, but that to me is the challenge, right? How do you do it kind of incrementally? I think that's that happy medium, doing it in increments. And I think the way that you do it is you kind of say, this is our goal, right? This is where we aspire to be. And this is the amount of time that we are to get there. That's why I think that bill that we passed was good. It sets some really kind of long-term goals of where we can be in some of these things. But it's going to be, to answer your question, I've had multiple conversations with people, multiple businesses, and multiple individuals, and this is a hotly debated issue in Holyoke. And my prediction is that it's going to only continue to grow in Easthampton.
Yeah, it makes me thoughtful about how we could maybe piggyback on the mayor's recently kicked off climate action plan initiative and use that as maybe a couple of venues to get some input from residents. That could be interesting, and see how they weigh these things in their own thinking.
And I know sorry not to cut you off, but I think it's, and here's why I think you're spot on, right? I think it's, in all of these kind of these touch points, if you will, where you're going to have these conversations, I think it's really, really important to lay it out to people, like as it, it's, if the question is framed, do you want to do away with natural gas? Again, I'm just using this, I'm speaking all, in generalizations. I think you're going to have a lot of people that say in an overwhelming fashion, yes, absolutely. But if you kind of hone in a little bit more and say, do you want to do this right now? If the net result is this is what it's going to mean for your monthly payment, and this is what it could do to businesses coming to the community, I think you're going to have a much more nuanced debate. And I think that something this serious, it makes all the sense in the world to have those difficult conversations up front, as opposed to on some levels, what's happening in Holyoke right now, where it's, oh my God, I had no idea this is what this was going to mean. Because that's what's happening there.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Cassie.
Sorry, I had to Beagle proof. Just for my own education, I'm going to be joining Sean with heat pumps. Is that technology transferable to larger dwellings or applications?
Are you asking me or just general?
No, I'm asking if anybody knows.
Sean, do you know?
I mean, I believe so, yes. I know that ductless mini splits, which is one heat pump technology is, but anywhere where you can run an AC, you can run a heat pump. It's the same technology, it just runs in reverse. Uses a different refrigerant.
I think they probably come in, like you want a technician who can help you identify the one that does the job for the size of building that you're doing. So in a multi-dwelling facility, like an apartment building, you might get multiple heat pumps doing the job for the domiciles.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you could do Starbucks with heat pumps. That's, I guess, what my question is.
I can imagine you can.
I would think so. A lot of these new technologies, it's about they're new, so the upfront costs are higher. And then if they work, you save money in the long run sometimes, or people just don't trust them because they're new. I know there's a crazy amount of great research happening in Amherst at UMass, where they're trying out all these different things with an eye towards production, as a land-grant university, making sure that whatever ideas they come up with, if they can have a net-free zero building on campus in Amherst, why can't we have one in downtown Easthampton? Those types of things, but it's still kind of in the works. So a lot
not there yet. Okay.
We don't want to invest in something that's going to be outdated in 5 years. But I think another aspect of this conversation that hasn't been mentioned yet that I just want to throw out into the room, because I hear it a lot, is the leaks in the current pipelines. That is a huge focus, especially after the Merrimack Valley explosion. That was something I heard from constituents. That's something we worked on locally, and something I think, especially when Columbia got shut down and bought out by Eversource really came in at the starting gate at the top of their game and fixed a lot of the old leaks, but we still have the oldest pipes in the country. That's true of all of our infrastructure. And so I think we're at a point now where that was 3-4 years ago, where, it may be a good time to have this conversation of, all right, did you shore up all the leaks that you inherited Eversource? And what's next? Now let's get the hot tubs in Easthampton. Let's talk about what it looks like in a local community. Just wanted to throw that out there, because that was the biggest issue I heard about, was not only we don't want expansion, but fix the stuff you already have, because this stuff's leaking into the air. We're all breathing it every day. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. Paul, I saw your hand and then I saw Dave's and then your name switched. I don't know.
Well, mine says that I got a notification that my hand was being lowered because it thought that I spoke. So I clicked it again.
Oh, all right. Paul, you go.
Okay. So I guess I have a question. Maybe I didn't interpret this right, but within that bill that was signed or statewide, up to 10 communities can ban natural gas, but that would just be new construction. So I guess my question is, I mean, we're in a situation where we don't have new construction with natural gas here, and neither does Northampton or Westfield or Holyoke. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say Southampton either. So if that's 5 communities all touching each other, all right here, aren't we effectively part of that ban if we can have no new construction with natural gas? I mean, how much do we have to study what these 10 communities do? I'm sure there are many communities that effectively already have this ban in place, because they're on a moratorium.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of the fact that the moratorium's not a permanent law. We have the possibility of the moratorium being lifted. What the reality of that is, I don't know, but we have the possibility. Whereas if the city council votes and the mayor approves and they decide we can never have it, then the moratorium's lifted. Well, now it's against the law. So, maybe it's a little bit of semantics at the moment, but I think as this conversation continues across the country, across the world, we're going to see the changing landscape. So those are communities that wanted to get out ahead of it like that.
Okay. David Kutcher.
Good evening. So, I mean, I get the point of this moratorium. I get all the points of the moratorium. But at the same time, when we, on our normal average electric bill, are paying 50% for delivery, if not more for delivery, in addition to the fact that, there's no alternative, and we're pushing to an electric-only alternative, where you can't go to natural gas, then without that being more under control, it doesn't make any sense to have a moratorium on gas. That fallback needs to be more under control, and there can't be a 50% delivery charge. That's just outrageous. I mean, if you're on a fixed income in this, forget about new business, but if you're on a fixed income here and your electric bill is going through the roof like that, yeah, you have no fallback. You're going to turn on your gas stove in order for heat. And if you're moving into new, let's say we build an affordable housing unit that is paying $1,000 a month in electric bills to heat it because they can't have a more efficient heating source, that doesn't solve anything. That makes an affordable housing unit unaffordable. So I mean, in theory, I love the idea of a moratorium. In practice, it's falling short of its goals here of migrating people off of gas unless they can afford to make the transition to another source, whether that's putting solar panels on their roof, putting a heat pump in, and heaven forbid if they're a renter and don't have control of it. I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
A useful set of points, David. Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal of the moratorium is to sway public opinion. I don't really know if there really is a capacity problem. There are a couple studies showing that there is no capacity problem, but it's an artificial thing made up by then the gas company, now Eversource, the new gas company, to both inflate profits, which they had $1.4 billion in profit last year. But then they'll go to the Energy Commission this year and say, we need to raise rates so we can upgrade our infrastructure. And the Energy Commission will say, yeah, that's a good idea. Don't worry about the $1.4 billion you already made. You don't have to reinvest that money. And I think that's really the crux of the issue is we've got a gas company that is taking full advantage of us, trying to extort a change in public opinion. And we have a state legislature that has the stick of reappointing these commissioners, or making laws, figuring out a way to do this, or at least investigate capacity limits that they claim they have. They deny it when these studies come out saying there are no capacity limits, but they don't show any proof.
David? You're muted there, sir.
Of course I am. I mean, I would be all in favor of any kind of encouragement for new construction or new businesses to make use of renewable fuels instead of gas. But I think we need much more carrot in this. And, you know, if it comes in front of the city council, I would say, yeah, let's give them economic development credits, however we define that, in order to use renewables when they put in new construction and new businesses and everything else like that. But that isn't going to work for every case and every situation that comes in front of us. And it needs to be responsible in using that. So if, like, for example, the Tasty Top behind there, and they say, you know what, we're going to take extra credits from the city of Easthampton in order to put solar panels on all of this, so it is a net zero, whatever, great. That's awesome. But if you're the hot tubs and you're saying that's never going to work, we would need a small solar farm in order to power the hot tubs, we need gas in order to power it, that's also a reality. You know, and we need to balance those realities of situations in order to have it as smart growth in the city.
Yeah, too true. I want to acknowledge that it's 4:58, and I only wrote that we would ask for Dan and John to join us till 5. So, any closing thoughts on this particular topic? Shall we invite you again in 6 months? Check in, send you messages in the interim. Paul, you want to take us home?
Well, I just really appreciate the fact that both of you guys, Dan and John, were able to make some time and come and speak with us about this. I was really surprised, honestly, that you guys were able to come so soon after we asked, both the same meeting. It's really, I think we're all really excited to have you, and we just really appreciate the work that you guys do, and for you coming and speaking with us here today.
You're here. Tom Brown?
I would echo that, both of you, John and Dan. But Gwen, I wonder if I can take 1 minute to go off topic. You may have seen, and I wish Jeff was here, but you may have seen that the Dunkin' Donuts project on Route 5 is going for an extension of their permit. And again, I hope I've got these facts somewhat straight. But when their plan was approved for that location, they were required, I believe, by the city to put in a traffic light, which obviously has to go through the state. And now it's been at least a year, if not longer. I don't know where they stand with their approval for the traffic light, but they're at a point where they have to get an extension. I just hope that any future businesses that are required to put in a traffic light on a state highway don't take a year or two. I wish there was a way to expedite that process so that it wouldn't take a year or two to get approval from the state for a traffic light.
I believe they have received approval for that, and they have secured the funding for it. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
That's what I was going to say, Gwen. They have private funding and they got approval.
Where I was going with that, Gwen, was the amount of time it took to get it, though.
Totally. That is the underlined point, yeah.
Because that may be an issue with the Northampton Street project.
Well, I would just, and I'm confident speaking for both my friend Rep Carey and myself, we are certainly always around to pick up the phone and call DOT and inquire and check on the status of any and all projects. So just kind of put that in your back pocket. That very truth be told, I mean, that's one of the easiest asks that we can do, to kind of pick up the phone and say, hey, what's the status of A, B, and C projects? So notwithstanding anything that's happened with the Dunkin' Donuts, certainly in the future, please feel free to share that widely with folks, that utilize us as a resource of folks who can pick up the phone and call really any state agency to get an answer.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I apologize about, I have, in the past 13 months of my life, or I should say of his life, I've got a new little guy who kind of sets the the guidelines in my house. So we were joined by my son there for a little bit. So the last 5 minutes of the meeting, I kind of was juggling my son. So if what I missed, I know Rep Carey will fill me in on. But to answer your question or just statement, certainly love to continue to have this dialogue. It's going to be an issue that pops up on a recurring basis, and it's something that needs to be had, in my humble opinion, that this is going to be a discussion and a debate that's driven by the local level, right? It's going to be happening in the local communities, and then reps and senators bringing it to Boston and saying to leadership, hey, not for nothing, but this is the impact this is having on the ground. So I would strongly encourage that we come back and kind of continue this dialogue and see where we are. I would be shocked if by the time we meet next, myself and the rep haven't gotten some reach out from a business or resident saying, hey, this is a challenge that we have here. So looking forward to continuing the dialogue.
Absolutely. If I could, and I'll just echo all of that. That's exactly what I was going to say. First, with the state agencies, Tom, call us the first time you think there might be a problem, because once it's too late, it's too late. And we're always happy to help with those kinds of things. And then this conversation, I think, is great. And John said it right. This kind of change happens on the local level. The local municipalities are incubators for the states as we're incubators for the country. And so with that, I want to thank you for being on this committee. As you said earlier, volunteer work that a lot of people wouldn't do. I don't even know you're putting all this time and effort into. So thank you for doing it, and definitely stay in touch about this issue and about any issue in town.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. May you have a lovely evening. We'll see you again in the future. So thank you for that. Members of the public, you're welcome to stick around and listen to us talk about the rest of the agenda, and maybe we'll see you in the future. Good stuff. How we feel? Yeah?
Feel good.
That was excellent.
Yeah, I thought that was useful. Great stuff. I feel jazzed about this. It feels like a thing that we could dig into a little more if we felt so moved. I think I'd like to pay a little more attention to the mayor's climate action plan, see the ways in which that links up with some of our thinking about affordable housing, what our newfound insights are into energy sources, et cetera. I think the IRA stuff that's happening at the federal level and being slowly rolled out over the next several years in the form of rebates and tax credits and stuff is interesting. So thinking about that should be cool. Tom, what are your thoughts?
Just looking for one clarification if someone heard it better than I did. Representative Carey said that if we brought forward a proposal to the city council to, I'm not sure if it was to lift the ban or to do what, that they would not approve it. It's interesting that he feels that. I'm just curious because that's some of what John was talking about, the grassroots efforts. But it's interesting that the thought is out there that if we brought forward a proposal to ask our city council to send a letter to the state, I guess, saying we'd like to lift the ban, that they would not approve that.
Yeah, I think I think you're reading that right. I think that's what I heard. And I think that it's probably to the point that Senator Vilas made about people holding with really strong principles and thinking in the long term, this is a great idea. And also that tends to put a lot of pain to the current moment. Chris?
I think we veered a lot into overarching energy policy. I'm all in favor of all sorts of new energy incentives and all that. But I think what we were supposed to be talking about was the moratorium that the gas companies are imposing on us and how to beat them out of that, because they were taking advantage of us. And no one's really at the state level doing anything to put some pressure on them. I mean, Dan, I love Dan. He mentioned the leaks, but I don't know what kind of sticks we have against leaks that aren't fixed. A lot of stuff's going to the air from that. We have higher efficiency than ever, lower demand because of that efficiency, higher prices causing lower demand, alternative sources that are causing lower demand. There's no pipeline crunch. It's probably fabricated. And when they're asked to show that there's a pipeline crunch. They just deny that they're making it up. They don't give us proof. Studies are showing that the demand is lower. No one does anything at the state level. And then, like I said, we've got this commission when they ask to, on the backs of $1.4 billion in profit, they want to raise our rates to increase infrastructure, and the state just goes along with it.
Mhm.
And then here we are arguing about energy incentives and no gas and new building constructions, exactly where they want us to be, while they rake in 1.4 billion. And we can't, we almost didn't have Casara because they couldn't get gas.
Mhm.
They only came in because the rest of the tenants agreed to pool their gas into a new meter or existing meters. I'm not sure, but they had to finagle away. And anyway, it's great to hear them give us campaign speeches, but doesn't really do much. Sorry.
Well, I don't know why you're apologizing. I think that's a fair take. And to be clear, in the future, if we were to do this again, I would want to spend some more devoted time at the preceding meeting, getting clear on what our main thrust is. So this was a great first rodeo, and let it not be our last, and let us learn from this so that we have a shared set of points that we want to make. And I mean, it's also completely reasonable to me that we don't have an entirely shared set of points to make. And I think that this was a good start. So thanks for saying that, Chris. It's useful. I'm not mad about it. Mo.
I would agree, Gwen. The next time I thought it was interesting, but I also can understand Chris's frustration because I think it's easy to get sidetracked. I think now this was a good learning moment. And I think that next time we can be very clear and stay on message and on focus and on mission,
Mm-hmm.
Great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Tom?
I just want to throw out a quick question that I do not want an answer to.
Oh.
Dave thought that was funny.
That means we can't get it wrong.
How do we feel about the EDIC sending a letter to the city council asking them to consider supporting lifting the moratorium statewide? What we believe they will shoot down. How do we feel about asking them to take a stand on it?
Nobody answer. Everybody shut up. He doesn't want
That was rhetorical.
No, I'm not going to answer, but I'm going to clarify what Dan said. Dan wasn't talking about a letter lifting the moratorium. He was talking about city council supporting expanded pipeline access for a pipeline, which are different things. Because it's
okay. How do we feel about that? We could talk about that at another meeting.
It's an interesting prompt. So let's bring it to the next meeting. I'll even write it down. Great. Paul, you have another thing. And Dave Kutcher, I liked your little sparkle heart reaction.
Yeah, no, that was good. Well, I was just gonna say that I think there is a distinction between like I don't know if there's a statewide moratorium. There's a moratorium, I think, in certain communities. And just like there's no statewide ban, they're talking about banning in different communities. And I think that the issue that I understand Chris is saying that he does not believe that there's actually a capacity issue. And I don't know anything about that personally. But presuming that there is a capacity issue, that they can only pump so much out, to us. I wonder if there's a middle ground somewhere where we can say, hey, if you are repairing your pipe because you have a leaking pipe and you want to expand the capacity by, 2 inches of your, in diameter of your pipe, so that way you can support this community that is on a moratorium right now. Is there some way we can find a needle-like thread there? And I'm not sure that that's necessarily a question for the EDIC or for Easthampton to have, but I guess on a community by community basis, it certainly isn't the solution that we can just rip all the natural gas out or bring it out of our economy. We don't have something to go to yet. And I guess trying to get to the bottom of whether or not there is a capacity issue, and if so, how could we resolve that in a way that would be politically palatable for these politicians who have to be sensitive to the fact that there's going to be this pushback that is based on a principled stance, but isn't necessarily absorbing the nuance of all of this conversation. And, also acknowledging, hopefully all of our politicians acknowledge that long term, we want to sunset natural gas, even though, it is kind of a bridge fuel for us, but we need to figure out where we're going first. And we don't even know that yet, because I don't think we don't have the efficiency of solar. You can't put solar panels on the top of an apartment building and that's going to supply the whole apartment building, So there's just a lot of nuance there in this conversation that gets lost. So that was my point, though, was that the moratoriums are on a municipal by municipal basis.
Yeah. So I'd like to bring this topic to the next meeting. And I see that we have other hands up. I want to make sure that I bring up at least one of my final points on this agenda that isn't about the gas deal. In particular, there is a public hearing next week about the Dunkin' Donuts at the intersection of East Street and Route 5. It's basically their renewal of their permit, right? It got a lot of attention the first time around, not all of it positive. Do we have a reason to believe that we should send someone in favor of its development to the public hearing as an EDIC rep? Tom?
Gwen, my only suggestion would be if we could feel out Jeff in advance of that to see if this is something tells me this might just be a rubber stamp.
It might be.
Of extending their approval.
Yeah.
I'd hate to show up with guns blazing, and I just mean that, I mean.
No, I get that.
I'd hate to show up with that and have it be something we don't need to oversell.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And Jeff might
I'll write to Eli, because I'll bet Eli has a sense as well. And I think my general assumption in situations like this, like we don't have enough meetings for anybody to show up to every single public hearing that could be contentious and have something positive to say. So I don't usually go without having discussed with you and then go and represent EDIC when you had no say in it. So I often go as myself and say, I am chair of EDIC. I'm not here in that capacity, and this is what I think. So I would do that unless you wanted to say, yeah, in general, EDIC is on board with this, and somebody should say something good about it as representing EDIC. Do you have any final thoughts on that? Because we can have like a tentative agreement that someone would go and be like, economic development.
If you find out from Jeff that we should take a stand on it, I'd highly recommend we do that through you.
Okay. Anybody have a different opinion? Or the same opinion? Anyone have an opinion? Is everyone neutral? Except for Tom and me. You're all neutral. Cool. All right. I don't know what to do with that. So great. Paul.
I'll just say it. I'm not super opinionated on this, but I do lean a little bit against. I don't love the Dunkin' going there. Mm-hmm. I'm not totally against it. I don't have strong feeling. I just don't love it. Mm-hmm. I'd rather it wasn't going there personally, but I'm not I don't feel so strongly about it that I think it's the end of the world or that it's even necessarily bad. It's just, it wouldn't be my preference to see it there just personally. And I live on the street, and I worry about the traffic there. I just worry that I just don't love there being a Dunkin' there. And especially because you go up 1 mile, there's another Dunkin'. You go up, not even a mile, the other direction, there's another Dunkin'. It just seems like, why are we putting another Dunkin' there?
It's the 90s, man, and we're putting up Dunkins instead of Starbucks.
Paul, let me ask you something, Paul. Why do you hate New England so much?
The installation of a traffic light there I find so interesting to think about. I'm trying to figure out how I feel about it, and just having it there at all is a real change to how that intersection works or fails to work. David.
I'm so excited for there to be a traffic light there. And I know I'm probably maybe I'm not the only person, but when I was taking my kids to Hatfield, that is the worst intersection in the morning when it gets busy.
Yeah, it's bad.
And then watching a school bus pulling a U-turn
Yeah.
Oh my
there
God.
is horrifying.
It's epic.
Horrifying.
A new adventure every day.
Yeah, so I'm all in favor of. I don't care if there's a Dunkin' or not. I mean, anything's better than that. What used to be a gas station, abandoned building thing.
Yeah.
You know, but traffic light, yes, please.
Dave, it's actually going on the other side, I believe, not where the gas station is.
I know, which is the only bummer is that they're on the other side. But still, like anything's better than what's there right now. So
Agreed.
I don't know.
You can put up a fake Prada storefront like they have out in that part of Texas. Chris Korchik.
I'm curious if anyone studied or knows whether or not they looked at putting a traffic circle there. And I know this is a real hot button topic, but I'm curious. Did they look at that?
Great question, Chris. Thank you for providing comic relief, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why that's so funny.
I am serious though. Actually, traffic
I
circle.
believe you. Mo, what do you got?
I just need to move along. I'm really sorry. So
It's past the time we said we would end. So now we're just in goof territory.
all right.
Would we like to close out this meeting? And we will bring a lot of this up in March as well. And I know we'll have some updates from Jeff about some stuff we talked about in January. Sean, you have a question.
No, sorry, I was trying to wave and hit the wrong button.
Okay, well, Sean, great to meet you. Okay, who wants to get us out of this meeting?
I motion to adjourn.
Okay, we got a second from Mo. All in favor, holler aye.
Bye.
Great to see all of you. Have a wonderful night.
Bye. Thank you.
I know.
Bye.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.